It was lying on top of a culvert. It looked like it was just placed there. It was just one more confirmation that she was gone. That was tough. That was tough, finding the phone because she didn't have it anymore. She was gone. This is hard. I just miss her so bad. That was hard. That was hard.
911, what's your emergency?
Somebody has my daughter. Please get there now.
Law enforcement and volunteers in Tennessee are searching fields and woods looking for 20-year-old Holly Bobo. She was last seen Wednesday morning.
Other items that belonged to Holly were found.
With each piece, we would make up our own theories and think, okay, she's trying to tell us, and she's throwing these things out because she knows that we're looking for her.
Living an isolated life in Decatur County, Tennessee, we never dreamed that something like this could happen in our community. From that point on, our community has changed. Our safety was shattered.
This is a small town, so everybody knows everybody. Everybody had been touched by Holly in some way.
The Bobo family is well known. They spent time together. They went to church together. Sunday afternoons, they had activities planned together. And they're a very close-knit family.
When I would go over to Holly's house, you know, the whole family would be there. You were kind of friends with her family and not necessarily just her. Holly and her mom were very close. Karen knew every move Holly made.
Holly was just precious. Beautiful inside and out. Very soft-spoken.
Mrs. Barney.
She just had one of those infectious personalities. Everybody loved her. And I thought of her as a daughter.
Most people just from the outside would think she seems really sweet, but she was really funny. And once you get to know her, that was the biggest surprise, that she was hilarious and silly and goofy.
Holly knew what she wanted in life. She had set goals for herself. She had her act together.
Holly had a serious boyfriend. Holly and Drew were set up by my mother. They had been together, I want to say, 2 years, and they were crazy about each other. She had gotten a promise ring, and Holly was in nursing school, so it was an exciting time for her, yeah.
Holly and I ended up in nursing class together. She was there every day, on time. She knew the importance of the exams that we had. It was very concerning for me that she was not there that morning. I didn't know if she'd had a car accident or if she was just sick, but I knew something must be wrong because she didn't miss.
There was a gentleman across the street that heard what he thought was cats fighting. At the same time, the neighbors next door had heard a scream. Now, when I say next door, we're not talking about next door as in, 100 feet away. We're talking about significant distance with a lake in between. And at that point, they became concerned. Clint is Holly's brother, and he was asleep in his room. And he woke up to the dog barking. And Clint got up and walked to see what the dog was barking at. When Clint looked down through the blinds and saw two people in the carport, he thought the one wearing camo was Drew Scott, Holly's boyfriend. The other one, female, it was Holly. To him, Holly was upset. It literally went through his mind that perhaps they had broken up or they were having some sort of relationship issues.
Clint sees a boyfriend and a girlfriend possibly having a disagreement. He's tired, he's sleepy. That's not a big deal.
Clint watched this guy in camo that he thought was Drew walking Holly towards the tree line, holding on to her. But he was puzzled because he didn't understand why Holly was still there. Holly would be leaving the house somewhere around 7:30. That was her normal routine. Why is Holly there? And Clint normally wouldn't have been home, but Clint had a class that had been canceled. So there was a series of calls from Clint to his mom. When Clint called Karen, he said to her, "I think Drew's here and Holly's with him." Karen had just talked to Drew just minutes before and knew that he was miles away across the county hunting. And she said, "That's not Drew. Oh my God, that's not Drew." And that's what started the panic. She was trying to call 911, and we also have Clint. He's trying to get through as well.
My neighbor heard somebody hollering, and my son can't find my daughter. Okay. And her car is still there, and he saw somebody in full camouflage.
I thought it was her boyfriend that she was hunting with, but now my neighbor's up here, and she said that she also heard screaming a few minutes ago.
Somebody has my daughter. Please get there now.
The scene was pretty hectic when I got there. There was a lot of people there. There was some blood found in the carport.
There were over 50 spots of blood in that carport, in addition to a larger pool, maybe the diameter of an apple. The blood on the carport was still wet.
We didn't know who took her or which direction they went or anything like that, but abduction is not something that happens here very often.
My mother called and she said, "Holly's been kidnapped." And I will always remember, I said, "My Holly?" And she said, "Yeah." You initially think, okay, well, somebody's confused about something. She's somewhere. But she's not been kidnapped. People don't get kidnapped.
Someone came to the door. The instructor's demeanor totally changed. I noticed it, but nothing was said until after everyone turned their papers in. And then she got emotional. And she said something had happened to Holly, and they weren't sure what, but she was missing.
Okay, I got a phone call on the morning that all this happened. And so immediately I went out to the Bobo residence, to their home. And by the time I got there, law enforcement had already arrived and Karen had arrived. And there was something of a crowd gathering in the yard, in the road, and around the house.
The EMA director asked me to be in charge of the volunteers to do land searches. We were looking for whatever we could find.
Law enforcement and volunteers in Tennessee are searching fields and woods looking for 20-year-old Holly Bobo.
It was really surreal to be able to wrap your brain around, I've just talked to you, and now I don't even know where you are on this earth. I tried to text her. Maybe she's got a chance now to look at it. Maybe I can let her know we're looking for you.
We were doing everything we could think of to do to try to find her.
There were people everywhere searching, on horses, on motorcycles, four-wheelers. Everybody had been touched by Holly in some way, and there were a whole lot of people wanting to do what they could.
The towns of Parsons and neighboring Darden, Tennessee, are praying and searching for 20-year-old Holly Bobo, who was abducted from her home by a man wearing hunting camouflage.
Who could have done this? There wasn't anybody who would have wanted to hurt her that I knew of.
Clint described the person he saw in the camouflage was a white male, dark hair, about 5'10", 200 pounds, give or take, and he was holding a black object in his hand.
Clint thought it was a turkey call at the time, but we think now that it was probably a gun.
There's no way that this was a crime of opportunity. It took a lot of planning, for lack of a better word, stalking.
At the end of the first day, it was just so... we were just all in shock.
You know, the investigators were trying to figure out what happened. The searchers, we were trying to figure out where she was, where she might have gone, who might have taken her. And everybody was pretty frustrated that we wasn't getting anywhere.
She was gone, just almost like she'd evaporated in the air. She was gone.
It was scary. It was kind of like, well, okay, why did they take her? And what if Holly was the first one? What if there's like a line of girls that they're gonna get?
I really did think that somebody had possibly taken her, but they would turn her out somewhere and she'd come back home and it'd be traumatic, but it would be over.
Holly, I love you so much. Please try to get home to us, and if anybody knows anything about her, please help us find her.
Kidnapping of Holly Bobo was one of the most horrible events of my life. I stayed with the family personally during that very terrible night. Nobody got any sleep. Law enforcement was in and out of the house where we were at all night long asking questions.
We went to the woods and started walking. We would walk elbow to elbow so that we didn't miss anything.
Everybody out there pushed themselves further than we ever thought we could go. The only outcome, the only choice that we saw was that we were gonna find Holly.
We covered an area of several acres behind the house. The search area got bigger and bigger and bigger, and you know, we probably searched parts of 2 counties. It was suspected that she may have been taken to a nearby logging road, which is about 300 yards from the Bobo house. We figured that she might have been taken to that road and put in a vehicle there and taken away.
There were 2 tips that came in. One from the gentleman that was across the street, the same man that heard what he thought was a cat fighting. He told law enforcement that he saw a white pickup speeding away on the road between his house and the Bobos. There was also another tip from a lady who saw a pickup fitting the same description further down the road. The first thing that was found was her lunchbox.
It was on a rural road about 3 miles from the house. That gave us a little hope in that we knew which direction that she had been.
That was very close to my home where they found that lunchbox. It was just about more than I could stand, and I just remember thinking, somebody's got her, and somebody has her. I don't know what I thought before then, but it was just like a confirmation in my mind that she's really gone.
While you have law enforcement and community looking for Holly, that never stopped. But you also had law enforcement checking out leads for various suspects.
Clint was the last person to see her. It would stand to reason that he would be the initial suspect. He went through all the standard testing. They checked him for scratches, any visible marks. They started looking into his background almost immediately.
Clint and Holly were very close. They got along really good. So it was hard for the family when Clint was investigated. I remember getting a text that we needed to pray specifically for Karen because she's lost one child. And The other is being investigated. We just needed to pray that she was strong enough to withstand all that she was going through, but that specifically. I'm sorry.
Clint described the man as being maybe a little bit taller than Holly, which Drew was.
As her boyfriend, Drew had to be high on the list of suspects also.
Drew turkey hunted, and hunting is a big part of our society. And practically everybody from grandmother to a 5th grader had on camo clothes.
But it would not be common for Holly and Drew to argue.
They were just a sweet couple. They really were. He cared a lot about her. I know he did, and she certainly did about him.
Drew Scott had a rock-solid alibi. He was questioned, but he was across the county hunting with another person and had actually encountered several other people while hunting.
He was hunting on Bobo family land. He ran into a family member. They asked him what he's doing there. He says, Karen gave me permission to hunt.
And so there was absolutely no question that he was not involved. Other items that belonged to Holly were found. Her books, papers were found. Some oversized note cards that had her name and the date, 4/13/11, were found. That was her homework.
A receipt was recovered that had her name and number on it, and that ties it directly to her.
With each piece, we would make up our own theories and think, okay, she's trying to tell us. She's probably rolled the window down and she's throwing these things out because she knows that we're looking for her. And I think that that was probably a way for us to keep our spirits up and keep hoping, stay with us, stay with us. We're gonna find you. We're looking for you.
During one particular search, we were walking elbow to elbow, and we had to stop because the dog was barking and circling a tree. So we sat for several minutes, just sat down in the woods, waiting. So then I was like, oh wow, what if I was to walk up on her? I don't know what I'd do. I struggled. Really struggled after that because I knew that I had to search until they found her.
The blood on the carport was checked, and all of it belonged to Holly. It was clear she didn't walk away from her home willingly. In fact, she was beaten there in the carport, spilling blood in the carport.
As time goes on, you lose the ability to think that you might find her alive. We've got 53 miles of the Tennessee River. We have some rock quarries, and we have caves and springs and hills and hollows and ridges. A lot of places that, if you were so inclined, you could dispose of the fruits of illegal activity.
It was unimaginable to us to even think that Clint could have possibly had anything to do with it. We all knew better. However, most of the law enforcement, the TBI and the FBI, were from out of town.
Clint took 2 polygraphs. To the best of my knowledge, Clint had no scratches, no marks, no anything on his body that day. Nothing pointed to the fact that he was involved. I spoke with the TBI investigator, had the early part of the case, and he told me categorically that Clint Bobo was not involved.
I think for us, the people who knew him and knew how very chill and timid he is, it was just verification that, okay, leave him out of it. Let's move on to something else. We really need to move on to who really did it.
As with any search, they started picking out the sex offenders. They zero in on a rapist named Terry Britt. Britt had been accused of stalking several women in the area.
He was a very important person of interest
Terry Britt would fit the description that Clint gave.
Terry Britt was creepy. He liked to stalk, if nothing else.
Holly would have fit Terry Britt's victimology. He liked young blondes. The TBI agent investigating at the time told me that Terry Britt fit the description. Also, Terry Britt's hurt a lot of women. He's a bad man. His history of being a sex offender makes him a prime suspect.
Law enforcement and the news media portrayed him as an ideal suspect.
But Holly did not know Terry Britt. Terry Britt did not know Holly. So one of the things that law enforcement did was try and what we call ping Holly's phone, see where her phone was. Even though that law enforcement was able to ping her phone, meaning look for cell towers that the signal was bouncing off of, that phone wasn't a smartphone.
At the time, 2G, 3G were in their infancy, so tracking and pinging a phone was not nearly as technically sound. You only get general quadrants back then, not locks like they can today. And one of the Holly's cell phone pings is in the direction of Terry Britt's home.
So law enforcement executed a search warrant on Terry Britt's house. They brought dogs out there to search as well.
They found multiple tools like axes, hammers, shovels, and a cadaver dog did hit on something at that house. Of course, a cadaver dog means that it's got the scent of death. Terry Britt basically denied it, and his alibi was that he had went out of town to buy a bathtub at a secondhand or a salvage place.
It's a salvage yard. They handwrote receipts. That would be easy to make.
The TBI looked deep into that receipt several times, but the clerk or somebody at the store remembered seeing Terry Britt that day.
They didn't find any DNA anywhere in the house, the yard, the cars that belonged to Holly. There was never a shred of evidence that Terry Britt was responsible for Holly's abduction.
The investigators were following up on everything humanly possible, and I mean, everything.
Drew and Holly went on a double date with some friends to the annual coon hunt. That's a really big event in Decatur County. A young lady that was with Holly and Drew noticed a man who she says is Shane Austin looking at them.
There were rumors that Shane was obsessed with Holly.
She noticed him 2 or 3 different times. She would look over, he would look down. She would look over, he would look down. And she eventually told her boyfriend that she was a little uncomfortable, could we go?
The rumor is that that was when his obsession started. So at that point, the police also looked into Shane.
Shane Austin, Zach Adams, his brother Dylan, and Jason Autry. They were a tight-knit little crew up to themselves. Shane Austin and Jason Autry are cousins. Locals referred to them as the A-Team.
Zach and his buddies, that was not our crowd. We would not have had any interaction with that group of people.
Soon after the abduction, Shane Austin comes to work and a co-worker notices scratches and alerts authorities. Shane was picked up, but he passed a polygraph that the group was together. One of the pieces of evidence, the receipt with Holly's name on it, is found in the proximity of Zach Adams' home. And he owned a white truck, but he denies any involvement in the abduction of Holly Bobo.
All 4 of the individuals denied any involvement in Holly's abduction and disappearance.
The only alibi that these 4 can give is each other, but there is no evidence to tie these guys to anything.
Nobody in the community ever gave up praying, hoping, searching to find Holly, to find some kind of clue, to find out who took her, what happened.
We had hundreds, maybe thousands of people come and volunteer to help look for her.
She just consumed my every thought, every day. Every day I searched. I was just obsessed with it. I would be driving down the road and see birds circling, and I would stop and put my boots on. Several from our church were walking side by side, and we walked up on the phone. It was lying on top of a culvert. It looked just like it was placed there.
Finding her phone was big because we were 20 years old. We always had our phone with us, so she was not usually without her phone.
That was tough. That was tough, finding the phone because she didn't have it anymore. She was gone. This is hard. I just miss her so bad. That was hard. That was hard. I was glad we found it. But at the same time, I was thinking I wish that it had been someone else besides me.
I think maybe we thought, okay, did they throw it out? The bad guys that didn't have a name, did they throw it out? Or did Holly throw it out and hope that somebody would find it?
People used to keep their doors unlocked, their cars unlocked, but now people were locking their doors and checking their surroundings and being more cautious.
It was really upsetting to not know who had done this. To add to it was that that person, whoever it was, they thought they got away with it. That was really hard for us to handle.
I think every time anybody was out fishing or hunting or whatever, that they was out looking for Holly.
The community and the family did everything possible. They would keep her case alive and her face and her picture before the public.
Her face was everywhere. I know when we went on vacations and trips, different places, I would take flyers and ask if I could place them in gas stations and places like that.
The case kind of takes a back burner at that point for about 2 years. And then law enforcement receives a tip and the case blows wide open.
For 2 years, tips were coming in from all over the place. There were psychics and all kinds of people like that were giving information, and TBI was continually interviewing people. But, you know, the case, I guess you would say it went cold.
Dylan Adams has gotten arrested. He tells law enforcement basically that he wants to confess to the kidnapping of Holly Bobo. I don't know why he chose to talk, but he decides at this point to tell everything.
You destroyed evidence. You withheld information. And if you lie to me one time, I'm getting up and walking out and we're done. Was Holly Bobo kidnapped? Was she raped? Raped by you?
Dylan confesses. He says that his brothers Zach, Jason, and Shane kidnapped Holly. He also confesses that he was part of the rape with the other three.
Dylan, more than anything, was a follower. He was one of these guys, he could be talked into most anything. But for the most part, whatever Big Brother Zach did, he was going to do too.
All four of these guys, Shane Austin, Jason Autry, Zach Adams, and Dylan Adams, had a variety of encounters with law enforcement over the years.
They were known for thefts, guns, and drugs.
Zach and his A-team were not good people. They were usually in trouble. They were thieves and druggies, and they didn't have a good record.
In February of 2014, after Dylan's shocking confession, they execute another search warrant at Zach's home. They search the property, they dig, they search wells, and apparently they came up empty.
One of the things that law enforcement did was check the phone records for all 4 of them, and their records confirmed that during the time that Holly was abducted and the hours that followed it, the 4 individuals were in contact with one another. Once law enforcement focused their attention on these 4 individuals, when you go back and look at Clint's original description of who he saw walking Holly towards the woods, size, body type, it would have been Shane.
Shane Austin is brought into questioning again. At some point, he tells authorities he can lead them to the body. He's initially given an immunity deal to tell them where the body is. Dylan Adams' confession led to the indictment of his brother, Zach Adams, and Jason Autry.
Decatur County Grand Jury handed down indictment of especially aggravated kidnapping and first-degree felony murder.
I remember everybody being shocked and when the press conference come out because, you know, that confirmed our worst fears.
At that point, I had not given up any hope, so I still felt like, okay, well, what they're gonna announce is that we've got her alive. I hadn't thought about murder, and I broke down. That was the only time that I can ever remember in my life. Physically, I felt physically that emotional hit, and that was really hard. So you kind of have to mourn the idea of even bringing her home, and you have to grieve that.
Jason Autry, Zach Adams, and Dylan Adams were indicted for the murder and the perpetration of kidnapping, murder and the perpetration of rape, and for premeditated murder. All 3 of them entered a plea of not guilty.
Apparently, Zach had ran his mouth a lot to people. I'm going to do to you what I did to Holly Bobo. He told a girlfriend something to that effect. He told somebody else, if you do this, you'll end up just like her. He sends a message to his brother, if you don't shut up, you're going to end up in a hole next to her.
Word got back to me that one of Zach's brags was that they had no case because they had no body.
Shane Austin couldn't deliver on his promise to show them where the body is. The deal comes off the table. Austin at this point is not indicted.
I'd actually got up early that morning. We was up probably about 5:30, and it was me and my cousin. We got in the truck, and we had our ginseng digging tools and our pouches. Once I got to that 3rd ginseng plant, I looked up and I seen a bucket. I picked the bucket up, and when I turned around, that's when I seen the skull. And I was just froze. And at that point, I couldn't even speak. I was just numb. It was like I knew it was her. It was like a feeling come over me, a kind of a happy but sad feeling. And then I'd actually broke down and sat beside the big tree and just literally bawled my eyes out.
Holly's skull was found, and it had what was later determined by the medical examiner to be a bullet hole in the back of her head, exiting through her jaw, because her mandible was also found. Other parts of Holly's remains were found, as well as more of her personal belongings. Her purse was found. Her billfold was found. Her car keys were found. Her promise ring was found.
It meant a lot to me to get her back home to her mama.
It's kind of bittersweet. I was glad that she had been found. But it just was not what I thought the outcome would be. It really wasn't.
It was shocking to know that she had been murdered, that, that we no longer needed to search every abandoned house and go through every county and every road and knock on every door. So there was some relief knowing that she was not coming home, but it was a bittersweet experience.
Where the remains were found behind the cell phone tower, as the crow flies, it's about 5 miles from Zach's residence. Now the state had a body to prove that she was indeed dead.
Shane Austin kills himself before he can be indicted. There's no known reason, there's no note, but one would surmise that guilt is beginning to weigh on him, and he knows that an indictment is coming. Jason Autry has been sitting on ice for 2.5, 3 years on unrelated charges, and he decides at this point he's going to cut a deal. Jason agrees to testify, turn state's evidence at this point.
Zach's trial started on September the 11th, 2017, and there were 2 full weeks of testimony. Jason Autry testified at trial that on the morning Holly was abducted, he received a phone call from Zach Adams. Zach Adams told Jason to meet him at Shane Austin's trailer, which was in the same area that Holly lived in.
He said, "I need to see you, I need your help."
Truthfully, Jason thought that Zach needed him to come over there and help him cook meth. When he got there, Shane Austin was there, Dylan was there, and Zach was there.
Where Zach was standing at the door, and he said, "I need you to help me bury this body."
Initially, Jason thought that the body was that of someone who owed money for drugs to Zach.
My nickname was Train. He said, "Train, that's Holly Bobo."
Jason agreed to help Zach, and they headed to the Tennessee River.
I brought it to his attention that there were no shovels or pickaxes in the truck. I told him, gut her, put her in the deep end.
Jason Autry testified that when that rolled up body was pulled off the truck and put on the ground, he heard a sound of distress come from Holly.
I told him, I said, "This bitch is still alive."
Zach went back to the truck and came out with the weapon, the .32. Zach picked up the end of the rolled blanket that would have been Holly's head.
Boom! The gun sounded. The gun went off.
And fired one shot at close range. A boat was heard, so that their plan to dispose of Holly's body in the water was foiled, and they put her back in the truck and hightailed it out of there. Zach dropped him off at his car, and he, being Autry, left, and that at that point he didn't know what Zach did with Holly or Holly's body.
Later, Jason asked Zach what happened to Holly's remains.
He said, "We throwed her out over near Kelly Ridge."
The trial was very stressful, very exhausting physically and emotionally. There was a lot of details that we weren't prepared for.
We called probably half a dozen or more individuals who Zach either knew for years or he had had contact with when he was incarcerated after Holly was abducted and killed.
He said, "I'll kill you like I did Holly Bobo."
All of them testified that Zach bragged and admitted that he had been responsible for Holly's abduction, rape, and murder.
He made the comment that it sure was fun. I couldn't have picked a prettier bitch.
He said, "You tell him if he don't keep his mouth shut, I'm gonna put him in the hole beside her."
He said, "I'll let Shane hit it."
He said that he would probably be going to death row.
He said it was going to the road, yes.
But has the jury reached a verdict in this case? Yes.
Zach was convicted of murder in the perpetration of kidnapping, murder in the perpetration of rape, and premeditated murder. Plus, he was convicted of the kidnapping itself and of the rape of Holly Bobo.
During the sentencing, Zach didn't want to look at Karen, but she called him out.
I would like for Mr. Adams to look at me when I speak to him. I know that she begged for her life because my daughter loved and enjoyed life. But you chose to take that from her.
We had a family meeting, and ultimately they decided to accept life without the parole plus 50 years rather than us go for the death penalty. And his brother, Dylan, pled guilty. Taking an offered plea means that it's a best interest plea, and he'll serve 35 years at 100%, no parole. Jason Autry's case is still open. Zach Adams' case is set for motion for new trial.
Everybody wants to overcomplicate this case. They want to add a conspiracy. They want to add a rumor. They want to add a theory. But what you really have is probably unrequited love that leads to obsession that is fueled by drugs, and it takes these people down a deadly, deadly road.
To be able to have him sentenced and get some vindication, it was hard, but it was a good outcome for us. But it's a very horrible story.
I would love to have a text from her. I was glad to see there was some justice for what happened to her, but didn't bring her back. She's still gone. Sweet face. It's just really hard. She was so precious to think that somebody just took her life. Senselessly. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Our lives will just never be the same.
you.